take enemy fire and still try to address a threat without being fear of getting shot.
So I'm thinking that is totally appropriate in Iraq, but what kind of a situation in the U.S. would you see that happening?
I mean, we've got a lot of constitutionalists and a lot of people that stockpile weapons, a lot of ammunition. I mean, we've got a lot of constitutionalists and a lot of people that stockpile weapons, a lot of ammunition.
Conspiracy theories are running wild tonight about the Army's plan for a multi-state training exercise this summer called Jade Helm 15.
What's happening is between July and September, a bunch of Green Berets, Navy SEALs, and Special Ops from the Air Force and Marines are conducting some realistic training exercises across the Southwest, including 17 different Texas cities. The goal is to see if groups of these special forces can move around the civilian population without being noticed. You know, blend in so they can place themselves in strategic positions to handle different threat scenarios. The military says these are vital skills when it comes to an ever-changing threat. But in the slideshow of the training exercise, it says Texas will be simulated hostile territory.
Blindsided customers were greeted with signs on the door saying this Pico Rivera Walmart is closed and does not have a reopen date.
All of a sudden, just like that, it closes? They shut the doors?
It's one of 5 Walmarts across the country shutting their doors, citing persistent, ongoing plumbing problems.
I think it's a lie. I think it's something else.
An uncertain closure, store officials say, that could last 6 months or more.
On Tuesday, the residents of Flint, Michigan were rattled by explosions that resulted from a secretive Jade Helm 15 Urban Army exercise.
Big, huge explosion. I mean, it was loud.
Explosions you'd expect in a war zone echoed through Flint, and people's homes shook and those inside were caught off guard. It all went down at the shuttered Lowell Junior High on the east side. And we've learned the blasts are just an Army exercise.
When the city representative was asked why the locals weren't warned in advance, his response was as typical as it is ominous.
Well, obviously I can't speak for the Army on that, but we try to give people a heads up when we can. We can't go into too much detail. We don't want people just coming to these things and sightseeing. So we have to be careful with it, and we obviously have to respect the Army's wishes.
Meanwhile, the Michigan Air National Guard published a warning just hours before they began night-flying helicopter drills from the Selfridge Air National Guard base into the surrounding area of Mount Clemens, Michigan. Jade Helm 15 appears to be underway. According to U.S. Army Special Operations Command, urban drills conducted by all 4 branches of the military are to begin in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, Mississippi, Florida, and Louisiana from July 15th through September 15th, 2015. The state of Colorado and 2 Texas counties requested to be dropped off the list of potential mock war zones. Clearly, the Flint, Michigan, June 2nd, 2015 exercises are way ahead of schedule, and no warning was given?
There's older people. I mean, they probably get a heart attack.
Some are saying Jade Helm stands for Joint Assistant for Deployment and Execution, Homeland Eradication of Local Militants. Homeland Eradication of Local Militants. This can only mean the returning veterans at the top of the Department of Homeland Security's domestic terror list. Back in 2009, the FBI launched Operation Vigilant Eagle, a nationwide operation that targeted militia, sovereign citizen extremist groups, with their sights set on veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. The Wall Street Journal reported on the memo trail that led months later to the desk of then DHS Secretary Janet Napolitano. Janet Napolitano warned of a surge of domestic right-wing terror groups that would recruit returning veterans into their fold in order to carry out attacks similar to the Oklahoma City bombing.
Returning veterans are targets of right-wing extremist groups that are trying to recruit those to commit violent acts within the country. We want to do all we can to prevent that.
That very same year, U.S. active duty Army military police troops from Fort Rucker in Alabama violated posse comitatus by assisting in traffic control and securing a crime scene. These soldiers were reprimanded because the president and the governor didn't request their deployment. The Posse Comitatus Act prohibits the use of federal military personnel to execute the laws. Regardless, the feds interpret the language as it may apply to troops used in an advisory, support, disaster response, or other homeland defense role, as opposed to domestic law enforcement.
It was earth-shattering.
It was quite an explosion.
They were very loud and shook my house.
The explosions came the same day the city said the U.S. Army would be conducting training in the area.
Here we are, 6 years later, and a summer of rage is heating up. The Obama administration's rhetoric and George Soros's dollars have done all they can to divide the nation. United we stand, divided we fall. Apparently, Northcom and Southcom see that as an order and not as a long-standing American value. John Bound, Infowars.com.
Recorded history has shown that many government leaders tend to sell the masses an official story that begins with and centers around the narrative of ensuring their safety and security by fighting the enemy. But what actually transpires is often the opposite. Rather than keeping the people safe, personal liberties are eroded, the common man is entangled in, maimed, or destroyed by the horrors of war. Economies are destroyed, and an unspeakable accumulation of casualties and the deaths of individuals who are used as pawns expand the cash-filled coffers and power of the elite. The political leaders, some of whom serve as lapdogs for corporate interests, who swore to protect the people, wittingly or unwittingly, break their oath and lead the people on a path of war. War that becomes perpetual because the conflict is continually sold as the rationale for peace. So the irony is that in their pursuit of peace, the people clamor for war. Meanwhile, the masses are convinced through media manipulation and propaganda that they themselves need to support these rich men's wars in order to secure their own safety. And as long as there are profits in war, there will be little incentive for peace, because the masters who hatch the plans for war have seen to it that these profits flow away from the common people and into the pockets of the elite. No one in their right mind wants to go to war. People don't desire to send their sons and daughters off to the horrors of the battlefield to be slaughtered, so that those who already live large can live even more extravagant lifestyles. So the masses have to be mentally manipulated into buying wholeheartedly into the war concept. Hermann Göring opined at the Nuremberg trials on April 18, 1946, quote, "Why, of course the people don't want war. Why would some poor slob on a farm want to risk his life in a war when the best he can get out of it is to come back to his farm in one piece? Naturally, the common people don't want war. Neither in Russia, nor in England, nor in America, nor, for that matter, in Germany. That is understood. But after all, it's the leaders of the country who determine the policy, and it's always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it's a democracy, or a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament, or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That's easy. All you have to do is tell them they're being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country." End quote. Military operations use as a smokescreen the deceptive blanket of operating for the purpose of national security and fighting the enemy. That is the formula that's worked throughout the ages. So don't expect the mode of operations to change anytime soon. As long as mass manipulation tactics work, why search for a new formula? History's example of the U.S. government's betrayal of its own citizens included the clandestine 1962 military proposal called Operation Northwoods. Under Kennedy's Joint Chiefs of Staff and led by General Lemnitzer, the now declassified Northwoods operation was a top-secret confidential document with the subject line, "Justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba," and whose, quote, "ultimate objective is overt military intervention." This document outlines the Joint Chiefs' intention to create the, quote, "pretext for military intervention in Cuba" that would, quote, "lead to a political decision that would in turn lead to military action," end quote. Military action equals leading the people into war. The bottom line is that the leaders desired to unleash the dogs of war and needed a catalyst by which the masses would be mentally manipulated into supporting their profit-making venture. If you question the concept that war is a profit-making scheme, I encourage you to read the booklet by retired United States Marine Corps Major General and two-time Medal of Honor recipient Smedley Butler. In it, Butler frankly discusses from his experience as a career military officer how business interests commercially benefit from warfare. You'll read firsthand from someone who's been there that industrialists whose operations were subsidized by public funding were able to generate substantial profits from mass human suffering. I'll leave the link in the description below. And if you want detailed video proof of this monstrous Northwoods agenda by the military elite against the people of their own nation, click on this link right here for an eye-opening coverage of this unbelievable document. Northwoods enshrines the notion and intent of national betrayal and deception by the hands of the very men who swore to protect the people. Every American and those throughout the world who put a wholehearted trust in their leadership should see this video. As even Hitler has said, how fortunate for leaders that men do not think. In addition to Operation Northwoods, the Gulf of Tonkin and Pearl Harbor incidents are just a few other examples of the U.S. government's leadership being willing and able to create a pretext for war, manipulate the media, promote pro-war propaganda, garner the sympathy of the masses, and with the endorsement of the people, ruin the lives of men, women, and children throughout the world in the name of huge profits for corporate giants. But that was then. What about today? Surely things are different today. Isn't our government more trustworthy now? More accountable for its actions? More transparent than ever? While most people are oblivious to it, some are alarmed at a large-scale military operation being conducted in a few southwestern states slated for July 15th through September 15th. The operation is called Jade Helm 15 and will be conducted throughout Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado. The concern is that this RMT, or realistic military exercise, is a precursor to the gradual introduction of martial law in the U.S. Whether you believe it is or isn't, let's take a look at some facts from the military's own published document. First, let's look at Jade Helm's chosen logo and slogan. The logo depicts two arrows intersecting a vertical sword. Obviously, the arrows and the sword are tools of war. In the center of the logo is what appears to be a transparent wooden shoe very similar to these right here. The wooden shoe is called a sabot, ironically the French root of our English word sabotage. It's derived from the Netherlands in the 15th century when workers would throw their sabots or wooden shoes into the wooden gears of the textile looms to break the cogs, fearing the automated machines would render the human workers obsolete. With the cogs now broken, the company had to depend completely on the efforts of the workers who sabotaged and destroyed the machinery. Remember, sabotage is a deliberate action aimed at weakening a country or corporation through subversion, obstruction, disruption, or destruction. One who engages in sabotage is a saboteur. Saboteurs typically try to conceal their identities or true intentions because of the consequences of their actions. Now ask yourself, why would our own military, which remember has a history of executing false flags, initiating wars, and jeopardizing the lives of its fellow citizens, use a symbol of sabotage in their logo as they work within the border of the U.S. conducting training exercises? The logo, combined with the chosen operational slogan, quote, "Master the human domain," should be enough to at least keep people on their toes as this exercise is conducted on American soil. Is this the human domain they intend to master? Jade Helm is said to be acting as part of a, quote, national security strategy that implies it's to prepare our soldiers to, quote, fight the enemies of the U.S. and, quote, to work with civilians to gain their trust and an understanding of the issues. So they want you to know that they're training to keep you safe from the enemy, and they want you to trust them. For them, this is all about providing safety and building trust. Maybe if he was still alive, Benjamin Franklin would warn us, "They that give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." With over 250 million deaths under their belts in the last century alone, how much trust should we have in governments to secure our safety? Is there any harm in not trusting them? Regardless of what the Jade Helm document says, history tells us that releases like these from governments can be reasonably considered unreliable for helping to discern what they're really up to. More often than not, if it says one thing, it's a safe bet to believe and look for the opposite. If anything else, special forces acting in uniform and incognito on the streets of American cities conducting realistic military training exercises serves to acclimate the people of this country to a constant military presence. And just as incrementally increasing the heat of a pot of water in which a frog is comfortably lounging will eventually and effectively destroy the frog, any acclimation process, when implemented gradually, will more readily be embraced by and destroy the masses. Hitler knew this and successfully implemented it. The best way to take control over a people and control them utterly, he wrote, is to take a little of their freedom at a time, to erode rights by 1,000 tiny, almost imperceptible reductions. In this way, the people will not see those rights and freedoms being removed until past the point at which changes cannot be reversed." End quote. So whether Jade Helm is a military takeover of the U.S. or not, it can at least be viewed as one of those imperceptible reductions that the American people with a critical eye should not allow, lest they one day wake up with their families in a boxcar headed for the cremation chambers.